Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. With me, as always, is my trusty counterpart, Tony Tressel. How you going, Tony?
Morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, good afternoon where you are. And joining us from the left coast, right near Seattle, Mr. Michael Oxman. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Greetings. This is the professional tree surgeon.
Okay, yes, we one of our episodes we talked about tree surgeons recently. In fact, it airs just this week. It's going to air, where he references how we're a lot more like surgeons than anything else. I found that fascinating. Well, Michael, we start our show off with a question that we give to all our guests, and we don't usually belabor the point too much, so we get right to it. And where we go, nobody knows, but we'll see how our conversation evolves. So, if you would, Michael, share with our audience the first time that you recall feeling a connection to a tree or trees.
I used to like to carve my name in tree bark with a knife. And, as a 10-year-old kid, you have to leave your mark in your neighborhood. And I was the dog peeing on trees around our neighborhood. And it was fascinating to watch those slowly vanish. Very discouraging to see the bark cover over. And then all of a sudden, I was lost to history.
Right, right. So, do you think, like knowing what you know now, did you get through the phloem into xylem, or were you just in the bark?
Oh, yeah. I definitely was down into the xylem.
All right. And was it an initial or was it the full name? Because it would require a little more dedication.
Well, my initials are MAO, Michael Allen Oxman.
Okay.
And people would ridicule at the time. The president of China was a very controversial figure back in the 60s. And so I had this affinity with him. So I was a jerk and he was a jerk, and we were like good old boys.
What? So that was Mao.
Michael Allen Oxman.
Yeah. And Mao was the Chinese diplomat.
Not very diplomatic. He was definitely on the dictator side.
Okay. And where was this? Where would you have been when you were carving your name in these trees?
Well, I grew up in North Hollywood, and here you guys are, you know, New England, Canada. I mean, Los Angeles is kind of its own little fiefdom, and I was the person that your mom told you to look out for roaming the streets of North Hollywood.
Interesting. So how on earth did you end up in North Hollywood?
Well, my dad worked on building airplanes, uh, and then he got into titanium work. He worked on uh, aerospace fighter planes for the Vietnam era war, and we think because he had a security clearance and he wasn't allowed to talk about his job that he probably worked on the Blackbird. He started work there in 1952,
Okay.
which was right about the time that this 3,000 mile an hour airplane was being developed.
Right. And it wouldn't have needed to have been light and strong like titanium.
Big time.
So do you recall the types of trees that you were carving your initials into? Did you know trees well enough to know what kind they were?
Yeah, there was this thing called the city planter tree, which was a Liquidambra strassiflua, the sweet gum. And the neighborhood where we lived was a converted desert. And later it was converted from desert into citrus groves. And then the citrus groves were taken out and it was converted into subdivisions. So Los Angeles had this thing where we imported our water from Colorado, believe it or not, a couple hundred miles away is where Los Angeles's water supply comes from. So now there's probably, I mean, I haven't been back to LA in 30 years, but there are about 8 or 10 million people that live in this town that used to be a desert. And if that canal gets shut off accidentally, due to global warming or whatever, you are going to have a bunch of dead people.
Right. Right. Yeah, I've always found it fascinating. Like I always, it spoke of quite often how Las Vegas was clearly carved out of the absolute desert. But I don't think people recall or know like how much around LA really was similar, like quite arid to say the least.
Well, if you take an airplane trip, I'll tell you. Well, for example, flying to Salt Lake City in 1997, I went to a tree climbing competition at the ISA, um, and that airplane flight is across bleak terrain. I mean, it's pure white. There's no vegetation there
Right.
outside of the mountainous areas where it's high altitude and the rain shadow drops enough rain to keep lush forests going. So yeah, we have a fake environment. We have this landscape that's a construct, as Jim Urban used to say. We've carved it out of nothing, and we've irrigated it and turned it into the Garden of Eden. And maybe the snake will come by someday.
Right. Right. Now, are you suggesting that's the case for all urban forests or urban dwellings, cities?
Well, the reason people live on the coasts of the United States, for example, is because uh, clouds come in off the water and nurtures the forest.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how did your transition go from the desert of Los Angeles and North Hollywood to the Pacific Northwest, or was there jaunts in between?
Well, yeah, I was involved in raising a family in LA, and then right about 1985, that kind of blew up. Uh, we needed to get out of town, and so we moved to a rural community of 18,000 people in Oregon called Grants Pass, um, and raised raised those kids for about 15 years there. I had a tree service there. I was in competition with a lot of logging companies that had troubled times due to the listing of the spotted owl as a threatened species on the Endangered Species Act, and resulting in many sawmills closing their doors. So these guys were energetic. You know, they owned chainsaws and trucks, and they were toppers. So I came from the city where ornamental pruning was the rule of the day. So I had to somehow uh, market my services as superior. Um, yeah, I had done a little short stint as a tree trimmer for the city of Beverly Hills Parks Department. And then 20 years later, I became a tree trimmer for the city of Seattle's Parks Department.
Interesting, interesting. And your how did your journey to ISA start then? Was it did you were you introduced to it right in at the Beverly Hills Park Department, or did it happen after that?
The only thing that I knew was the California Arborist Association, who were involved with promoting the Tree Trimmer Jamboree.
Right.
And so I went to one. I actually went to 2 years in a row. Bob Weber won, I believe,
Yeah.
both of those years, and he's now out of, I believe, Asheville, North Carolina.
Correct.
But he totally blew everybody away. The organization was not ISA in my mind. It was my boss who went to dinner with the owners of other tree services and didn't invite me, and I was not eligible. I was just a marionette on a string.
Speaking of marionettes on a string, I'm curious what it was like being an arborist at the Beverly Hills Parks Department, or being in the Beverly Hills Parks Department. Is it do they hold themselves to a prestigious status, being that they're Beverly Hills, or is it just a regular old Parks Department? What was that like?
Well, it was kind of split into two crews. There was the palm crew, and then the wood tree crew. And so I was on the wood tree crew, a climber. The palms crew mostly used bucket trucks, and they had a really cool girder bucket. And I don't know if you've been involved with 75-foot buckets, but those things bounce around like crazy. Oh my goodness. Just as kind of a, as the hazing for me as the new kid on the crew. They put me up in the girder bucket in a palm tree across the street from the Beverly Hills Hotel, which has been in a lot of movies. It's a fancy place, and there are palm trees there that are the skinny ones. Um, they're called Washingtonia robusta, and they only grow in southern hot climates. But it did scare me bouncing around in that thing. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't such a thing as safety protocols. There wasn't such a thing as a lanyard. You had to just operate that to handle and not get bouncing. Otherwise, you were toast.
Wow, wow. So they would you would service the streets in front of the stars.
One time we were in an alley pruning trees from probably the communication line or the power line position on the utility pole just above that. And to get close to the wires, we switched from the hydraulic clipper to a uh, short wooden handled pole pruner clipper.
Yeah.
And I had that clipper hanging on the edge of the bucket, and I was up in there when a car wanted to get through. And my groundman indicated that I needed to stop so he could let this car through, which was a Packard, like a 1950s something Packard with the rounded nose. And as that car came through underneath me, I turned around to look, and my elbow knocked the pole pruner off of the edge of the bucket, and it hit the hood of this Packard
Oh,
right next to the hood ornament. Oh my goodness. That was kind of like the beginning of the end for my tenure at the Beverly Hills Park Department.
so pray tell, whose Packard was it, or don't know?
Well, the, the point was that I wasn't the person that dealt with the PR fallout on that one.
Right, right, right. Man, that's fascinating. I don't think I never would have thought, but of course, Beverly Hills would have a parks department, of course. And and then what was the next? You said Oregon. You worked at a parks department.
No, no, I, I, I hung out a shingle in Oregon, and I had to get involved with the local Arborist Association. I should just tell you a little bit about the geography of rural Oregon. Oregon is um, all mountains, a spine of mountains running up and down the coast. And where we lived, it was 250 miles south of Portland, and uh, uh, down below us, down in California, the next town was Sacramento, the capital of California, which was 225 miles. So there's this 450, 500-mile dead zone around my town. And so we weren't able to participate in arborist training, education, and uh, fellowship activities uh, unless we went there.
Right.
Uh, so, so we created our own group called the Rogue Valley Arborist Association because it was near the Rogue River Valley, which is where Dutch Brothers Coffee comes from for some of the people that are aficionados of there. But at any rate, I did develop the habit. I was addicted. I went to go see Shigo at our PNW ISA conferences. We invited guest speakers. We had Jim Clark and Nelda Matheny come when they took over the authorship of the Arboriculture book from Dick Harris. Dick Harris was one of our featured speakers. He would drive up and down the coast in his motorhome to attend various arborist events.
Hmm.
And I started consulting for the local municipality to educate myself. I started cold calling authors of publications And I am one of these guys where I will just call you up and say, hey, hi, I'm a professional tree surgeon, but I need to know this and that about what it was that you wrote in your last article or what you spoke about on the platform at your last presentation at a conference. So I was rather nosy. I still am, actually. We should probably talk about some of these people that I kind of try and ingratiate myself with. Um, I recently called up Mark Johnston, who wrote three books. He lives in Ireland. He was a tree warden or whatever they call the tree officer in England. He wrote the book Street Trees of Great Britain. I mean, this guy was uh, uh, really influential uh, personality and a researcher. He was on the staff of Marist Wood College
Hmm.
in England, which is where all of the advanced arboriculture research is centered. And so I would just call him up about a month ago, and we talked about his new book, Planting Ideas for the Urban Forest, which is available for a free download as a PDF file. It's got a 540-page book describing his memoir of his 50-year career in arboriculture.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how my whole life has been. I use the social element of arboriculture to connect with people and learn stuff, and hopefully I can then share it with some other people.
So, can you think of the first time you and the first person that you called in this manner, and how it, and then maybe give us a list of the who's and what you recall most from those interactions.
Well, one guy that was willing to talk to some nobody who he didn't know on the phone was Dick Abbott.
Oh
And
yeah.
Dick owned a company called ACRT, which was
Uh huh.
Arboricultural Consultation, Research, and Training.
Correct.
ACRT.
Yeah.
In fact, their website is ACRTINC. At any rate, he eventually hired me to work with Peter Dubish. Peter
Hmm.
was the author of the training manuals. He had two of them. And then one of those training manuals was a certificate course in line clearance uh, tree trimming to prevent your staff from getting killed, getting zapped.
Right.
And uh, like I said, I'm from the age before there was such a thing as safety, and I have gotten zapped by electricity in trees several times.
Wow.
And this is a mark of shame. And I don't know how I managed to not die. Um, but so so the, so Dick he helped direct me. I wanted to know stuff, and he says, "Well, why do you want to know this?" And I said, "Because I want to write something um, about uh, basically risk assessment." This was back in the 90s. I wrote an article about tree risk assessment. Another one was tree appraisal, and of course, the Forest Service had the reigning system for appraising the values of trees,
Right.
and very crude by today's standard. But if you go to my website, you'll see all the stuff. I had it published in Arborist News. I published in Arbor Age magazine.
Hmm.
I published in Tree Care Industry magazine. Starting in about the 2000s. So actually, in the 90s. So I was living in a town of 18,000 people, writing these articles that the, the real authorities in our industry lived in Connecticut and were working in the Rockefeller estates, and I was working on this guy's 40-acre timber farm. So I needed to beef up my my pitch. I needed to get some cred. I needed to uh, somehow rub up against these people that actually did know something, that had gone to college, and rather than somebody that learned by climbing. I wanted to switch over to how we met. So after I met Jerry Baronic,
Uh-huh.
and he took me up a 336-foot, 3-inch redwood tree. I had so much fun that I wanted to invite other people to experience the joys of the canopy.
Yeah.
I was feeling my oats. I'd just gotten hired to take Michael Taine's place at the Seattle Parks Department,
Okay.
and I had written some stuff, and I just felt my oats. So I decided to host an event, and I had gone to ISA conferences and donated little knickknacks to the tree fund auction. So I decided to host an invitational climb and charge money so that people that wanted to climb in the old growth could support the tree fund's research scholarships.
Yeah.
And that is where Ben Tresselt came in.
Right.
Wow, did Ben ever come riding to the rescue? So, Tony, if you get a chance, please thank him.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go to that auction. It was in Milwaukee. There, it caught fire. I believe that Tim had bought a Harley Davidson for $21,000, and they sold it that night for $29,000 for the tree fund. So they got like $8,000 profit on that. So I had donated a gift certificate on the climbing team, and that sold for like $4,000. And within 6 months or within a year, you and your wife showed up, and we had this great big party up in this 250-foot tall spruce tree.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea who was coming because I totally lost control of this event that I was hosting.
Right.
Uh, Ken Palmer graciously offered to carry the insurance for this event.
Right.
We needed that. We could not get a permit from the Forest Service unless we had an insurance certificate.
Right.
So he did it. And Dwayne, I think you had come to PNW,
Yeah.
and you talked about your career as a competition climber and as a trainer. So I knew that you and Ken were going to be a good, solid addition to the climbing team. But we had a limit on our Forest Service permit of 12 people. The Forest Service does not give permits for group events for more than 12 people.
Right.
And why? It thrashes the forest.
Yeah.
We thrashed the ferns underneath that 250-foot spruce tree.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic. When you can go to the YouTube movie produced by Jerry Baronic. It was graciously sponsored by Keith McCormick of Bishco.com.
Right.
Wow, did you guys ever band together and coalesce into a super efficient climbing team where we had a safe event, nobody got hurt. Unfortunately, we did get a ticket from the Forest Service because our permit expired after 2 days, and we brought in 12 more guests the following day after you guys left and went to Seattle to the ISA conference. So in fact, they had police dogs, and it was just a big mishmash. The ranger that had given us the permit was on vacation, so the people that showed up to find out what this big crowd was doing out in the woods, they didn't know what was going on, so they came loaded for bear.
So that happened after we left.
After you left,
Oh,
yes,
I heard that something had occurred after we left, but I didn't know exactly what all transpired.
it was CBS News. They brought 3 people, including their cameraman who spent the night in the tree, along with Dan Krause's dad and
Right.
Peter Jenkins. So there was a 9-minute segment on the Sunday morning TV show showing all those people climbing that tree. Graham McMahon from New Zealand showed up. It was just a stellar climbing crew. A lot of the people that came from Tree Climbers International out of Atlanta were there.
Okay.
A real who's who of the tree climbing, uh, I guess, contingent were there.
And that was '02, correct? 2002. Yeah.
That was two, and then so we spent 4 days in that tree. 25 people climbed up there, and then we immediately went to Seattle and had an ISA conference. That was the very first conference where 7/16" 11mm rope was allowed to be used in the climbing competition. It was an event where one of the female climbers had her climbing lanyard uh, tail dragging, and it came around and whacked her. So there became a rule saying that all climbing lanyards have to be secured at both ends to the harness. There was a lot of good stuff that went on there, and environmentally, it was called Old Growth and New Technology, and Jerry Franklin, who was the head of the Forest Service at the time, he gave a lecture saying that if we have major diseases and pests, that could decimate forests around the world, which since 2002 we now have put a name on that, and that's called climate change. So yes, it was a fast moving time back in 2002.
Mhm.
I learned a lot. I wasn't necessarily too gracious of a host. Um, I remember I was using a crossbow to shoot the line up in the tree, and somebody didn't like where it was placed, what it was running over, or how high it was, or something, and they pulled it out. And to get a line up in one of these trees sometimes take hours. So that was a fascinating obstacle to deal with. Have to reset a line with a dozen people underneath.
Mm-hmm. And we used the big shot the day we climbed it, and I think Toby actually got it in one shot, the first shot.
The thing about shooting lines more than 100 feet in the old growth forest is that seasonally there's too much brush in August to do that. It's You're best doing your climbing in the off season, in the winter, when there's no leaves on the trees. Alder trees in particular in that neighborhood block your view, and you can't really see what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
And Toby invented his version of Big Shot, and he was a master with it. He knew just what size. I believe he used a 3/4 inch bolt as a weight tied to his Big Shot fishing line. So we had good people. I mean, nowadays, when you look back and you see, Newt Foppa, who was on the crew, Christine Engel won the very first women's tree climbing competition in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
She was there.
Yeah.
Ken Palmer, 3-time winner.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne Newstater. I mean, we had the top people. So you guys really set up some inventive rigging. You had this elevator line that made it super easy to get up in one of these trees. And then I had to try and I was using a pair of CMI ultrasenders that I didn't know how to use and had never used before. And of course, when I was floundering away, guess who's standing underneath me watching with Jerry Baronic with his high-resolution video camera showing how I could just hang there totally out of control. So it was a good learning experience, a good sharing experience.
Yeah. Well, and Rip was there, and Toby and Michael was there, Michael Tain, and Tony and his wife, both, and Susie, both. And Susie ended up doing the slide line. We created a slide line from one tree to the next. Well, I didn't know the video was available. She went from the tree down to the trail, but how was that video available for people? Is it searchable, or is it?
Well, Dwayne, you might be surprised at hearing this, what I'm about to say right now.
Okay.
That that slide line was a diagonal zip line from about 150 or more feet up to the hillside
Right.
down below.
That's right.
It went at an angle
Yep.
and it went over the trail.
That's right.
And this was the main trail to enter Olympic National Park. Many, many people hiked along that trail alongside our tree, directly underneath us that day, and they reported us as having a hazard that obstructed public access into the national park. And that is why the next day the rangers came out and wrote us the tickets. All because of this really inventive rigging. There was a really rotten snag that was maybe 75 feet tall right next to this tree, and Ken did a fantastic job of tying that off with a whole bunch of marls and rigging it off so that if it did collapse, it wouldn't hurt anybody. So we did a lot of stuff in the name of safety, but in the end, it was safety that was our downfall.
Huh. Interesting.
So yes, it's on my YouTube channel. It was produced by Jerry Baronic.
Correct. Yeah.
Toby Sherrill paid Jerry's way, um, and Keith McCormick from Bishco. He he, uh, he he paid a lot of the money. He had 500 copies printed up, and then when the Tree Fund moved their office from Urbana to the other old office, they threw away all of their records, including dozens or a couple hundred of these video DVDs. We, you, you'll hear me say a lot about archiving and how important it is to capture our past for the education of people for posterity. And I believe that the stuff that you've done early in your career, Dwayne, with Harbor Master Canada, and what you've done, Tony, you've written stuff for Tree Care Industry Magazine, and you've taught these classes with people. And those students of yours are out there training their students. So this work that you've done, unfortunately, you had to have been there in that class that day, wherever that class was. But the only witnesses will soon be dead, and then their students will out be there training the people to do the stuff that you trained them to do way back when. So thank you for creating the training industry. I think that the training industry is this totally unique, modern iteration of the arboriculture industry, which started off as storm chasers. You know, back when there was this thing called the Yellow Pages book,
Yeah.
that was the internet of the day.
Right.
That before the Yellow Pages, people would just drive around in trucks and they would say, "Wow, we're out of work. Let's go down the road and let's go set up shop in some town and see if we can sell some tree work and go knocking on door to door." Well, so you have brought that process of marketing to such a mature phase right now that modern arborists don't know all of the growing pains that you and your industry went through to develop this marketing so slick.
It's interesting you mentioned the Yellow Pages. I was on ISA's research trust. I was the research trust liaison for my chapter, and I ended up going to a tree planting event in Washington D.C. And it was right. Bush Senior was at. He had just finished his presidency, and it was his first official act in Washington since his presidency. And General Schwarzkopf was there. I sat amongst these people, but it was an interesting event. But the Yellow Pages come in. I had a day in hand, and I wanted to go meet some local arborists, and so I went to the Yellow Pages. And I cold called people, a lot of the Yellow Pages, and had a couple invite me to come visit. And I went out and saw their crews and saw their shop. But the only way I could find them was the Yellow Pages.
Well, you just talked about some of this other stuff that's happened. You mentioned Washington, D.C. In 2017, I went to the ISA conference there, and there was a ceremony with several of the industry people about a heritage tree program
Hmm.
that was started in 1976 to identify trees that were alive at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So now we are 250 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. So the ISA had done this hunt nationwide for 200-year-old trees. And they came up with a big list, and there are a bunch of bronze plaques now. Like that tree that just uh, burned up in Hawaii has a bronze plaque on it. There's one in Portland, Oregon that was recognized as being a living witness of the, the Declaration of Independence. So it was such a success. There was a book written about all those trees called Famous in Historic Trees that they decided to do it again with the signing of the uh, United States Constitution in 1787.
Okay.
Did you know that the Revolutionary War lasted 11 years? Did you know that George Washington had to lead that group of tattered rebels around for 11 years until finally the Constitution was signed and we recognize heritage trees? Uh, uh, there were 61 trees identified in 1980, 1987. There it was. So the ISA got together with the NAA, National Arborist Association, now known as Tree Care Industry Association,
Hmm.
and they collaborated for the first and last time. I don't know. Bob Felix and Cal Bundy, they had a thing going between the ISA, very competitive,
Yeah.
and the NAA. So I was lucky enough to know about a 250-foot ponderosa pine tree, which used to be the world's tallest ponderosa pine called the Big Pine. It was in a Forest Service campground, and we nominated it to this nationwide heritage tree registry in 1987, and it received a bronze plaque. So I've been in contact with to, to blow our own horns.
Hmm.
Arborists need to say what a fantastic job we do. Arborists need to say how fantastic trees are. Arborists should say how wonderful it is that we could do this, this, and this to protect and provide for these trees. So, so at any rate, in 2017, we got one of these plaques put in the Smithsonian. It is now in the Smithsonian. It's the only exhibit in the Smithsonian Museum's permanent collection that is that mentions the ISA, and I was just so glad that they had decided uh, to recognize the fact that trees and people's associations go back a couple hundred years, and they're truly significant as parts of our society.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's, in any society or civilization, there seems to be a strong alliance or connection or historical significance to various aspects of whether it be cities, communities, or just civilization as a whole. There's and it goes into spirituality, into just shelter, food, heat. There's just so many aspects that trees bring to the human condition, I think.
Well, people love trees for a reason. They're fantastic. We are so privileged to be allowed to work with these magnificent living creatures.
Hmm.
Wow. Talk about the best job in the world. We're out there in the sunshine, breathing the fresh air, getting exercise, challenging our abilities, and working physics on massive structures. So that's quite the job description. It's way better than sitting in some office someplace or sitting in front of some computer right now doing a podcast. We could be out. We could be out there playing.
Yeah,
But yeah, so that's what I do now. I just sit in front of my computer. My son is my climber for my tree service, and I've gotten a promotion. I'm now in charge of loading the branches on the truck.
You're a branch manager now.
So- yeah, yeah. Officially a branch manager.
We should we should talk about the branch manager, Dave Nordgaard brought us together back
Correct.
in 2006,
Yeah,
Dwayne, when you and Nancy came out
yeah,
and climbed the cottonwood tree.
yeah.
What do you remember about that? And you know that video is also on my YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that was a that was a fun trip, and it was interesting. What was cool about that one was, well, awesome cottonwood number one, but the idea of putting the trampoline up there, so there was like basically a a platform or a place to hang out. And then the espresso machine that was brought up, there was a coffee machine hoisted up, and we actually like had sort of a lunch in the canopy, if you recall. That was pretty. And then once again, the zip line came out, and Scott was the first one to test it out, and he didn't hold back. All of that is in the video, of course.
Yeah, and Toby was the host of that event,
Correct.
and after we did this Bogachil spruce climb, I tried to keep it going. And when I knew that Dave Northgard was going to be involved in putting on the 2006 event in Minneapolis, I urged him to uh, put together a gift certificate for climbing guide services. So the Minnesota Arborist Association did offer that to the tree fund. It was sold the year before, and Toby was the purchaser.
Correct.
Toby ended up inviting a couple dozen of his friends. Wow, it was such a privilege to be on that guest list with Bruce Smith and all
Yep.
of these people that I have looked up to my whole career. And like I said, I lived in a small town, and for me to get to know anybody, to get to meet anybody, I had to get on an airplane. So uh, Toby's wife, Ann and Nancy, they were just having a wonderful time hanging
Yep.
out up
Yep.
there. There was a fish fry up at 75 feet in the air. It was just an amazing event called the Minnesota Trampoline Tree Climb.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I don't know if was that. I don't think there the for some reason it didn't carry forward after that. I think that was the last one.
Yeah, well, it's hard to follow Dave Nordgaard. The guy is a dynamo. He is the ranch manager. Uh, he just he doesn't quit. He has such an infectious personality. He's so giving. People want to be around him. People want to see what his brain is cooking up because he's always got something going. He's an inventor. I mean, he's a mechanic. His son does a lot of his welding and stuff. He's expanded. He's taken on Caterpillar and Vermeer as competitors, and is starting to dominate. He supports our industry, donates stuff, and all these different tree climbing competitions. He shows up at all the trade industry shows. He's the kind of people that arboriculture needs, and we have benefited so much from the contributions of these people that just want to pitch in because they know they're creating a good life for themselves, and they're inspiring people that want to create their own good life. I mean, look at who's paid my rent for the last 50 something years. My customers, they pay me to come and fix up their yard. They don't know what to do to their yard. I have to show them. I have to tell them, wow, this is a great tree. You should invest in it. Look at the money you've saved by never having done any tree work since you've owned this house for 24 years. Well, they realize, wow, I missed the boat. This tree could be in much better shape if we let Ox work on it, or Tricel or Newsdater work on the tree. It's going to be an asset that it appreciates in value. So the arboriculture community, headed up by these organizations like DCIA, ASCA, ISA, all of the ones in Europe, the Queensland Arboriculture Association in Australia. All of these groups put us together. We synergize. You can percolate around and decide the best way to interact with your contemporaries. And all of the people watching this podcast will realize that we didn't make this stuff up. We borrowed it. We stole it. We yanked these ideas from uh, examples set by other arborists that came before us, and we're just repeating them. We're just trying to do the right thing for the community who loves trees just as much as we do.
Yep, it's true. Very true. And yeah, I think you're right about the, finding your place or whatever, because there's always a place. And, I think the other thing that people maybe don't realize is how relatively easy it is to get to know. I had an occasion to be in Hawaii, and it just so happened that we were returning from I was speaking down at the New Zealand Arborists Association, and our flight back had us connecting in Honolulu. And my wife and I just thought, well, what the heck? We may as well stay a week while we're there. So we just fit it in, and we were already there. Let's just stop in Hawaii on the way home. And unbeknownst to us, it coincided exactly with two things. One was the World Surfboard Championships, and the other was the Pearl Harbor event, which they overlap. And I don't know if that's on purpose, but I was watching, totally unplanned, the World Surfboard Championships take place and watching it assemble. We got there before it started and watching them set it up. And I got this real feeling of what it was. It really reminded me of how the tree climbing competition goes. And then I'm there the day of the comp, and there's surfers out there, and there's all manner of television. Like, it is being majorly publicized. It's the World Surfboard Championships. Every news outlet or sports channel was there. You could see all the cameras and the stuff. And I'm talking to this fella, and he's explaining everything to me and what's happening out there. And I noticed people were they would look over at us and kind of whisper to each other, and I never thought anything of it. And it did catch my eye. And then all of a sudden they announce his name, and the guy's like, "Hey man, sorry, I'm up. I got to go." And he boots out there, and it turns out he was the defending champion. And he's just visiting with me like I'm a guy. Like, and I didn't know who he was, so I wasn't scared to walk up and ask him a question. And it reminded me completely of the International Tree Climbing Champ. Like, anybody could walk into the park where the World Championships are happening, and you could walk up to the current or past champion and start talking to them, and they'd gladly explain to you what's happening in the tree, and you'd have no idea you're talking to the world champ. And we don't get the publicity the World Surfboard Championship gets, but it is that easy. You talked earlier about calling somebody up. Like, I remember when I first dared to go talk to Shigo, it was at a TCIA conference, and he had been the keynote speaker. And I went up to him and I just said, I'd like to. I actually wanted to apologize to him because I had heard some things that I was told by other arborists that he believed that he was against fertilization, that he was against certain things. And in his keynote address, he talked about every single one of them. And he said, people are out there saying this. I have never said that. People are out there saying I say this. I have never said that. And so afterwards, I went and I said, I owe you an apology. And he's like, I don't even know you. How could you have to apologize? I said, well, I've believed things about you that others told me. And I apologized for that because I thought they were true. And you dispelled every one of them in your keynote address. And that was it. We were friends after that. And I could say we actually became friends.
You're breaking up on me, Dwayne.
And I could say that we actually became friends after that. And it was just that easy. It was just a matter. And anybody can do that to almost anybody in this industry, regardless of how long they've been in it. In fact, I think the longer we've been in it, or the more willing you are to just share and talk to anybody. And I think that's a key attribute, and that people should know. Just be brave enough to ask and talk to somebody that you'd like to meet, and you might be surprised the friend you'll make.
I want to plug a couple publications. I'm big on social media, and Shigo wrote a 500-page book, but we have Facebook. So, if we're talking about the tree climbing competitions, there is a group on Facebook called Tree Climbing Competition. It has, 5,000 members or so. And it is a great place to find out where events are that are coming up near you. Whenever I am sitting here at my desk and surfing with my mouse and I see an announcement of a tree climbing comp, I post it on there. And it's pretty darn easy. It, if if social media posters are efficient, they can work it so that you only need to make about 4 clicks before you can send that to somebody else. So if you want to find out about that kind of stuff, like there's a fantastic review of the new ANSI A300, uh, no, Z133 safety rules right now that says it. I did not know this. I think the carabiners can now be 22 kilonewtons instead of 25. Stuff like that. You can learn things that are happening right now on the internet that would have taken a lot of research uh, before. And then another outlet for me is a column that I write in Arb Climber magazine. And Arb Climber is it's about an 80-page magazine with all kinds of uh, articles specific to climbers, the equipment, and the process of uh, safely getting up and down trees. So check out rescuemagazines.com. That's available on mail order. It's available through catalog sales by tree equipment companies all over the world. And then there's some other things. YouTube. My YouTube channel has about 900 videos on it right now. I added one yesterday. Yes, this weekend was a fantastic event. And for marketing, I hang out with gardeners. Okay, I love gardeners. Gardeners pay my rent. Gardeners give me referrals to homeowners that want to fix up the tree that is beyond the scope of that gardener's services. So we went to a garden tour Saturday. We visited 9 private gardens in this 10-mile community where I live called the Burien Garden Show 2026. So if you go to your YouTube channel, you search for Burien, Burien Garden Show 2026, you'll see a 4-minute video that is a slideshow of my photos and videos. And then I also have a link to my Facebook page, my album of all 80 photos that I took on Saturday. And I was able to sponsor this event. I also sponsor the West Seattle Garden Tour, which is coming up in a couple weeks, which I've been sponsoring for 13 years by giving 3 Japanese maple trees every year to the raffle. So I don't know if you go to garden tours, but you get to be in some fantastic yards. Wow, are there some of these gardeners are super gardeners, and you can learn something if uh, not if you're like me, if you're talking, but if you just shut up once in a while, you can learn something from a gardener.
Speaking of somebody talking a lot, Tony, have you got any comments or feedback? 'Cause I was going to ask you about what your experience was like at the Bogachiel, but I mean, we've jumped all over the place. But I'm just curious if you'd like to weigh
No,
in
I'm
at all.
just enjoying the conversation. It's fun. I mean, the Bogachil's trip was great, but I've learned things about the trip that I didn't know. So just seeing it from Ox's perspective is cool. I mean, I
is.
knew rumors of little things like that, and that was my arboricultural career was pretty seminal. I was the first time I think I met you, Dwayne. I think
Oh yeah, it was. It
I think
was
it
the
was the first time we
met
actually
them.
met. I'd known Ken and Rip through Arbor Masters since the late '90s. That was the first time I met Michael Tane House. And of course, so there was quite the trip, and it was actually 2 trees, right? Because there's one, and then the other one leaned over, so you climbed from one tree to the next, which was kind of cool. It was a wonderful trip.
And you know that the leaning tree fell over, right?
Yeah, I did know that. Because I was checking on it a couple years ago, just out of curiosity, and it the one did fall over, which I guess is part of the ephemeralness of the whole thing. And I was out there for we then went to the climbing comp. I didn't stay for the show, but I volunteered and set up at the climbing competition That was the second time I ever volunteered. Because I'd volunteered in 2000 when it was in Baltimore, and then in 2001 in Milwaukee, I couldn't make it because I was working. But from that time, that 2002, I volunteered for 21 years straight, I think. I don't remember math right, at ITCC.
That was the first one. Interesting.
Yeah, that was, but that well, technically Baltimore's first one. Then there was a gap, but 2002 started a streak. Yeah, it was
Tony,
wonderful.
what's your favorite event to tech or judge?
Anymore, I've worked them all, but now I think I really appreciate the work climb. Just because there's something to watch. It's when you're stationed at an event, it can get a little monotonous. So at least the work climb has some variety to it. I actually just helped out with the work climb here at the chapter this last weekend. We had our climbing comp. I've worked them all at one other time, but pretty much all of them. You know what? I haven't really worked the ascent event, but when I was doing it actively, it was still the footlock. But it's just been fun. I've had Tread took me all over the country and the world too, right? Because 2011 was in Australia. To tech down
Have
there.
you been to a NAOM, North American Open Masters tree climbing competition?
I haven't been to that one. I've been to the North American competition, not the Open Masters though. That's held privately. I would say 2019. I kind of fell out of that loop. Of course, COVID hit and everything kind of dwindled down for a while, and then I just didn't get back up. But I think it was time for me to kind of to move on there and do other things. So I really pretty much just help out with chapter events now, which I greatly enjoy, and still do it. It's a lot of fun.
Part of the NAOM involved publishing their rule book, and the rule book is pretty progressive, I guess is how you would put it. And so I went to an event called Treepalooza in Florida, and Treepalooza was a tree climbing competition, but the aerial rescue component was a team event where there was 5 arborists, and they were all judged on their cooperation and synergy. And after I came back from that with my son, we took both of our video camera footage and we produced a 13-minute documentary film. So the film is called Treepalooza, and it's accompanied by a 2,300 word article about the history of tree climbing competitions at Treepalooza. So then I got this gig basically with Art Climber magazine, and they agreed to publish just about anything I want to write. Like as a result of this podcast, I would love people to send me ideas for what it is that you want more information about. So this is a conversation. Yeah, we're just sitting here and you're clicking on play, but actually we depend on your feedback. You have a fantastic audience. You have 100 episodes in the can of the best arborists in the history of our field. So this is a repository that's an essential library of arboriculture. So we need people to check those books out, and we need people to give feedback to us and go to these events. There was another 13-minute documentary that we published called Treetopia. Oh my goodness, look, I'm wearing my Treetopia shirt. Oh, this is an audio only. Dang it. Okay. Hey, I think in the future podcasts are going to be video. There you go.
Yeah. Well, we recently, based on requests, we're on a lot of audio platforms, but we're going to be launching ourselves onto YouTube for the first time, but not only in audio format, but we will be available on YouTube, maybe even by the time this podcast goes live. I don't want to put any pressure on you, Tony, but
no pressure, Tony. Just hurry up and get it done. So.
No. I shouldn't even. Tony can cut it out if he doesn't want it in there.
No, I mean we kind of stuck with the audio. Just quite honestly, the biggest reason is it's easier for me to produce like I have other things that I have to do in life. So it's easier for me to edit the audio than it is video. So that's one of the main reasons. The other thing is I wanted to keep it very, very accessible. And I think a lot of people listen to us like driving down the road or in the chip truck or mowing the lawn or doing those types of things. And I like that about it.
Are
So
you in Lancaster? You know,
yeah, well, I'm just outside. I'm
there
just
is a
east of there.
reference to tree planting in a book that took place in Lancaster, which was the home of the author James Michener. James Michener wrote these 700-page books. He wrote a lot of them, and he's old. And he wrote about his grandfather in Lancaster during the Depression in the 1930s. And as a gift to his community, as a workforce project, he hired people to plant trees in the community of Lancaster. And I would imagine that those trees are now huge. It, yes, the book is fictionalized, but I believe that is his autobiography. So if I were to ever be in your neighborhood, I would want to go dig up uh, this, the trees that were planted in this book called The Novelist by James Michener.
Yeah, I'll look it up. We have plenty of big trees, that's for sure. In 1976, at the bicentennial, like you were saying, the state of Pennsylvania launched a project to find trees that were alive when William Penn would have taken possession of the territories. So they identified them, and they call them. They're most of them, all of them, are white oaks. So they call them pen oaks, and all of them have a plaque on them. And there's quite a few. Well, I say quite a few, 5 or 6 around here. There's not that many of them total. And there was one just recently fell over 2 years ago, unfortunately, due to some armillaria root rot. But it was at a meeting house, at a friend's meeting house, and actually, a good friend of mine was married underneath of it, and so we have a lot of pictures. So it is cool those how trees sort of mark the history of things. But there's a lot of Revolutionary War history. So the 250th anniversary of the United States is a big thing around here. Of course, I'm an hour and a half from Philadelphia. So.
You have Valley Forge nearby. I got to go to Valley Forge a while back and climb this sycamore tree that had a whole bunch of steel cable holding it together with Joey Cornell. There's a video of Joey Cornell and his kids climbing this tree back in way back when. But it was behind this fenced enclosure. It's in the area of Valley Forge National Monument that's kind of the backstage. It's not the area where the public can go. Well, so Joey and Mike Teddy knew where this tree was, and they wanted me to see it because I was, out of town guest visiting. Just an amazing tree, um, right on the edge of this creek, and the branches, the, the, the branches on this sycamore tree stuck out 100 feet on each side of the tree. On one side where the creek was, it was very mushy, it was marshy, and the branch was laying on the ground, and it actually took root, and it was like a second tree on this 100-foot long branch going sideways. You guys have the most amazing uh, old landscapes there that are really teaching moments for arborists when we walk into a forest that's outside of the area where we're super familiar with.
Yeah, I know that tree. And then there's quite a few of them down there. There's probably the most famous one in the park is what they call the Lafayette Sycamore, which is where General Lafayette would have set up his headquarters during the Revolutionary War over the winter when the Revolutionary Army overwintered there. And that one is, last time I knew it was 120 feet tall, but it had 160 foot of crown spread at its widest. But you look at the tree and the landscape itself is big. You look at it and it's like, yeah, it's a big tree, but it's one of those trees like, and then you get up in it and you're like, yeah, it's a big tree. Like it's like, oh, I'll just bounce over to that limb and tie into there, and you're like, nah, that's not. I'm gonna need another rope, yeah, for that to happen, and a throw line, and the rest of the day. There's beautiful trees. Oh, you're right. It is a wonderful part. And what's really cool about some of those trees is the trees themselves as organisms are cool, but then they're connected to the history of things and just they've been in that spot for so long. You can't help but get in the top of them and wonder what it would have been like if the tree had a time-lapse camera, right?
Mm-hmm. Ancient elevations. I've had an idea for years of a show or something like a documentary type series that would called Ancient Elevations, where you would, because I know a lot of people that know where some of these cool trees are all over the place, and where you would ascend into the tree. So you first of all you take people via camera up. What it's like getting up in it, viewing it, and then doing exactly what you said, Tony, where you would literally do through cinematography and AI, I guess, or whatever, but have a time lapse of what it was like when the tree first was a seedling and what the whole landscape would have looked like, and then watching its progression and each episode would have this time lapse where it would show its tree, and then now and then it jumps to you in the canopy viewing it from this space, and just going. It was a history show, right? Ancient elevations. That'd be fascinating. And my other thought of it would be to like give the trees some recognition, like use the way to that would be each one would be a momentous occasion where the tree would be recognized and plaqued and as an ancient monument, a living monument. And even if they're not, like there's some old limber pines up in the Crow's Nest Pass here that are 7,000 years old, but they're bones. They're not decaying, and some haven't even fallen, but they're not tall, but they're old things, and their structure's still standing, and they're not rotting. It's fascinating.
Shigo had an artist that illustrated some of his work when he worked for the Forest Service. And because he was the chief scientist of the United States Forest Service, he had a budget and he had some pull. So he hired this artist to draw his coded theories about the uh, morphology of the tree structure. And he made this see-through tree cutout where you could see the rings, but you could also see the bark. And it was a famous poster with just the most beautiful pastel art called Birth, Life, Death, and Rebirth of a Tree. So Shigo, Shigo said that trees are just long-lived shedding organisms. And he meant that the tree is just as valuable in its decline as it is during its prime.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people can be that way too. I mean, I haven't climbed a tree in years, but I thought that I was going to just operate the remote control and never do anything again. But instead, I'm operating the mouse and I'm collaborating, I'm exchanging, I'm collecting, I'm archiving, and I'm learning from these arborists. Do you realize how many new books there have been published about trees lately? There's hundreds of new books about trees. And if we just work it right, if we get organized, then I think we can hand over a pretty complete package to the up and coming arborists of the future.
Interesting. Yeah, there is I think the having a place or places for people to tap into, historical the historical aspects of trees and the arborist industry is pretty cool, and I don't know if there'll ever be a consolidative effort, or if that's even necessary or possible, but there's a lot of people that have a lot of collections and a lot of history that and I hope it doesn't get lost. And like Don Blair said in his podcast, or maybe it was after the podcast, but he said similar to what you said. He said, "What you and Tony are doing really great," because he said, "When an old guy like us dies, a library burns down." And because some of it is just it has to be shared through the story, the story and verbal ways. I mean, it's one of the most powerful, most ancient ways of learning about history, right? Is through conversation and stories.
When you're talking to your guests, do you have things pop up that you'd forgotten about and they become relevant in that particular conversation, in that moment that you wouldn't have considered later?
Absolutely, and it's one of the reasons that we purposely don't script or do anything where we keep it very conversational, and it's very organic, and like I mentioned to you before we started the session, like I describe when people ask what it's like, what are the questions, we invite them on as guests. I say it's like, imagine the snow thawing in the spring, and it forms a little bit of a little rivulet of water, and that water flows and bumps up against an obstacle like a twig or a branch, and it turns and goes around a rock, and it just eventually gains momentum. And as that snow thaws, we get a slow trickle in a stream. And that's how the conversation goes. And so you just don't know where you're going to end up and what triggers a thought or a question. And this has been a classic example of that, where it just flows along. And as Tony mentioned, there's aspects that I had heard things about the day after of the Bogachil spruce climb, but I didn't know the detail that you just shared with me now, or I don't remember it. And Jerry did such a great job, of telling that story in video and verbal. Like he narrates it, and the Bogachil spruce is just a really well done. I don't know, what do you call that? A docu video or?
Well, he has 7 books out now. Um, uh, he, the Fundamentals of General Tree Work is in its 8th edition. It's a
Wow.
classic. But the way we interact with these people is, it's important to recognize their repository of knowledge in their brains as a tremendous gift. So I mentioned, as I surf, I see stuff, and I saw a photo of these people coming over the Oregon state line from California. And so this was on Rhonda Wood's Facebook page with her husband, Humberto Mojica.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just said, well, heck, if you're ever up into Washington State, give us a call. So boom, we had coffee the other day. And Rhonda, she's the former landscape arborist for Disneyland. And Humberto, they were a team over there.
Yeah.
And they're responsible for the crisp landscape that millions of people have visited while they were there.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's retired. They're both retired from that job, but she's a professor at UCLA teaching arboriculture and urban forestry to students. So we have this next chapter, Dwayne. Tony, you are going to be coming up with something amazing in the future. All of us are looking forward to some opportunities that really haven't become apparent to us yet.
Yeah, that's a good Rhonda. I should get Rhonda on the show. I met her when I trained at Disney and got to know her well there, and really encouraged her to compete. And she hadn't. She was thinking about it, and I was very pleased. It was maybe a year or two later to see her at her first tree climbing comp, and she did that for a while. But I didn't know that she was at UCLA now. That's another guest we need to get on the show, Tony.
There you go.
And that's often how we do find our guests, Michael, is this way, by our talk conversation.
Another guest you need to get is Robert Noddy from England. I hope you guys can get some people from around the world.
Yeah.
And really spread your goodwill around, and please give the gift of arboriculture knowledge to the rest of our people in our community.
Well, we're doing our best. We've had, is Mark our only guest from Europe so far?
No, we had Kristen was on.
Oh, that's right.
Kristen Molstad, and then we had from
right. We had Kristen. Yes. And we had Menno from New Zealand.
Menno, New Zealand. So yeah, we have.
But we need to get a better effort out there across the pond for sure.
Time zones can be an issue with a lot of that stuff. So, but we work at it.
Yep, we do. Well, we started a tradition this year. I don't know if it'll be an annual thing or if it's just this year only, but for this, our 4th season of Tree Actions, we decided that we would draw our conversations to a conclusion with a pithy point discussion, or at least a quote out of Pithy Points. I don't know if you've seen this publication by Alex. It was one of his little or known publications. It was called Tree Pithy Points, Brief Messages on Tree Biology, Tree Care, and Philosophy. There's 950 of them. And I don't you attended some of his workshops, did you? Did you ever go to New Hampshire for a workshop, Michael?
No, I didn't go to the multi-day ones. He had to come to us.
Okay. Well, if you went to one, if you ever were there, and he had a small group of, he called us the Tree Function Education Group. There's about 20 colleagues, friends that he would call up all pretty much every year, and he would pick a date and he would invite us to come visit. And sometimes five would show up, sometimes 10 or 12, sometimes I ended up just visiting myself for a few days. But and we would just talk about trees and stuff. And he was really wanting to encourage us to go to continue on teaching tree biology, like he did, or with the passion he had. And he had kind of some people selected as were that he felt would be good candidates for that. And I was fortunate enough to be one of them. But this book is a kind of a collection, partially of he would write down words or phrases on a piece of paper, 100 of them or more, and pass them out and say, which one do you want to talk about? We could spend a day on any one. There's 100, so we should have plenty to talk about. So here, there's 950, and we ask our guests just to pick a number between 1 and 950, and we'll see what it says.
How about 800?
Whew. Oh, wow. Our first few, we've had low numbers. Now our last two guests have picked high numbers. That's interesting.
Well, there's only 152 myths, right?
Right.
He's got another book about the myths of
He does.
truth.
He does. Wow. So this is Tree Pithy Point, number 800. The heart was thought to be the center for emotions. We still use it as meaning love. Too bad the center of a tree is called the heart. If any tree part should be called the heart, it should be the symplast.
Wow, what's a symplast?
Well, the symplast is what we would call sapwood, would be the simplest way to describe it. Sim is living, plast is cell, so living cells. So basically, from your young phloem to your cambium to the whitewood, I guess you could call it. Heartwood is not alive technically. It's apoplast, so that would be non-living wood. It's not decayed, so it still has structure. But symplast is, I guess, directly translated, I think would be living wood. And what we would call sapwood would be the common term you would use if you're looking at an ISA manual.
Well, the symplast is the hot zone of the tree.
Yeah.
Trees have a lot going on. They are multifunctional, and in these actions, like transpiration, using the capillary action to suck or force fluid around and respirate it out into the atmosphere, is done in this kind of like bundle of straws uh, uh, formation. It's kind of like the columns in a army's marching formation. Like I was a trumpet player in the brass band. I went to every high school football game from 1968 to 1970. We played on Friday nights and we marched in columns and rows. And that is where the xylem and the cambium and the phloem all operate in their own territory, in their own space, their own marching orders, doing their own thing and having their own outcome. So the heart of a tree really is in this respecting the boundaries of the various biological components, all these structures that are allowing fluid transport and a whole bunch of other actions to occur, except for the lenticels. And the lenticels got turned around some way. They're going sideways, and they're vents.
Yeah.
And to have vents is probably a, a structure that rigidizes the tree structure, because they're kind of like cross braces on the between the studs of a house, the lumber. You also you have to have a way to uh, to unify all of those vertical up and down corridors.
Hmm.
Uh, so the Simplast is it's the heart of the tree, but it's the blood of the tree. I think I'm really saying that, you know, the heart is the blood. Just because it happens to be pumped through a long skinny tube might not mean that it's going through a round heart that has 4 valves on it.
Right.
So there you
Right.
go. That's my take on Shigo's version of understanding tree physiology, so that humans can conceptualize the spark of life that is a complete mystery inside of it.
Yep. There's still lots to be left to discover
Is that what you were thinking
about
I was
plant
going to say?
intelligence. What? Is that what you were going to say?
What were you thinking I was going to say about the Simplast?
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, when you mentioned the cross braces and lenticels, I think what popped into my mind on that was parenchyma and the radial and axial parenchyma that are really like that provide a lot of that rigidity and also have the ability to differentiate, same as cambium. Parenchyma cells can as well.
Well, we do need to get out the microscope every once in a while. That's what Shigo taught us. He said, get the microscope out ahead of time before you get the chainsaw out.
Yeah. Well, that's the he told me once that he meant the book to be read in reverse. So you're supposed to start at the back, and the very first pithy point, which is actually 951. It's unnumbered, but he always said he meant it to be read reverse, and I don't know why. But to survive, keep your message simple and repeat it. And ignorance of tree biology has been and still is the major cause of tree problems worldwide. And that's actually pithy point number one. And yeah, like you said, get the microscope out before the chainsaw. And I don't know if you were quoting Shigo on that, but I'm sure I've heard him say the very same thing.
Well, this has been great, you guys. I'm so glad we got together to kind of the good old boy club reunion from 2002. Just
Yeah.
urge you to go check out some of the resources that are out there. Use them and make money off of them.
And tell our guests how again they can do they just search the name, or where can they find your YouTube channel? What do they how do they look it up?
Well, I have this kind of persona. My website is treedr.com, which is treedoctor.com. My license plate on my truck is TREEDR. My Instagram handle is at TREE_DR. So, and my phone number ends in 8733. Are there phone numbers that don't end in 8733?
Well,
TRE.
our 1-800 number for Arbor Canada is it ends in 8733.
Well, yeah, swing by, send me a message. I want to hear from all of the arborists. I really need your feedback. I would love to hear your ideas about what topics haven't been adequately explored. And I love to poke holes. I love to find out questions that there are no good answers for. Those are the ones that I want to ponder.
Those are good questions to ponder, and I agree. Well, thank you also, Michael, and we really appreciate you being on the show. Thanks.